Forgiving is a movement of the heart to let go of the hatred, of the armoring that really keeps us from our wholeness. Okay? So let's look a little bit further. We've gotten to the step of you kind of let go of some of the narrative and you open. And maybe sharing a story of one woman I worked with some years back now that really, really touched me because she had found out that her husband had had repeated affairs and she was in a rage. She felt kind of like a murderous rage. And, this lying bastard, how could he do it to me? How could he do it to the kids? And then, she basically asked me, how am I supposed to let go of my anger and forgive him? And my first response was, don't even try. In fact, the anger is the starting place. Honor it. Respect the anger. Now, that doesn't mean that you spend the next 10 years believing the angry thoughts, because that is hell. That's prison. But you let the anger be a place of attention. So that's where we started in working together, of bringing her attention to the anger, and really I basically said, feel it as fully as you want to feel it. Just let it rip, just let it be there. And she let it be as big as it was, and it kind of filled the room. And I was in Bethesda then, that's where I had my office, and filling the room, filling Bethesda, and it kind of spread across the East Coast like this wildfire, and then across all the continents until it was like, it was huge rage, really, really big. Many of you know the experience of feeling betrayed. It's huge. She let it be as huge as it was. And then as she started feeling the hugeness, she could feel underneath it something else. Because when we let something be just as it is and we really are present with it, it unfolds itself and we sense what's under it. And under that rage was fear. It was very deep fear. And it was a fear that something's wrong with me. That I'm not attractive, I'm not lovable, I'm rejectable. And then underneath that fear, layered into it was shame. That I'm bad, I'm fundamentally bad. And with that, a loneliness. That I'm gonna be alone. And I'm imagining that many people can relate to this layering, because it's in a lot of us. That fear of being not okay, and that we're rejectable, and that we're going to land up alone, or we are really alone. For her, this was the place for bringing that self-compassion we explored in the last week, where she just had to keep feeling that the rawness and the pain of lonely, not okay, and kept on putting her hand on her heart and offering. I have different words that I offer myself. She found some words that for her were helpful. And I can say honestly, there were months and months that's pretty much what the process was finding that kind of caring presence with herself and having friends help to hold that. So it was really after those months of being with that she could begin from that heart space of self-compassion to then look out at her husband through clearer eyes. So she broke the trance by stepping out of the blame, feeling the anger, feeling the fear, feeling the shame, being with herself. Then she could include him in that heart space, and she could see what she hadn't seen before. And that was really his own fears of aging and his loneliness, and feeling his sense of not being appreciated and that his life was over, and his pain, his suffering. And she was able to be forgiving, and she divorced him, and they were not bitter, because it wasn't coming from a hating and angry place. It was just coming from that the trust was broken and she couldn't re-enter the intimacy, but she could still care about him. Now, I share that, and in that case she could create a distance. For many of us, we might be thinking, yeah, but it's not like I can divorce my child, and my child's where I'm feeling resentful, or my parent. Or maybe we're in a situation at work where we can't leave our job, but there's the resentment. And so I want to say that forgiving is not a one-shot. It's like what'll happen is that we'll get offended or feel victimized or judgmental, and the armor will go up, and we'll find again that sense of where we feel hurt or afraid, be with ourselves, open up, be able to let go of some of the feelings of being armored and tight, and then it'll happen again. And not to look at that like, oh, therefore it's not working, or I'm in prison on this one, but to trust that every time you have the courage to put aside the narrative of blame and to touch into where your own vulnerability is, each time you are beginning to become more and more familiar with that compassionate presence that's more who you are. In other words, your identity is shifting. The more moments we replay our resentment, the more we're actually feeding those neural pathways that keep us in an egoic state. Every time you soften and feel that sense of including another, you're actually waking up into a more whole experience of who you are. Gradually, that experience is something you trust and rest in more than the victim and the judge. And that's freedom. Now, a few more comments on this, just checking time. For many of us, when there's a wounding that's really strong, we might think forgiveness is really what we want, but our hearts are so tight and so hurt that it's just not in the cards when we want it. We can't will ourselves. And what I found, though, is that if there's an intention there, if that wise part of us knows that's where we want to go, we want to be able to let go and open, that intention opens the door. You're already on the pathway of forgiveness just by intending it. Does that make sense? Share my own story on that one. That when I was 27, I was in a spiritual community, and the person I considered really my first teacher was very emotionally abusive to me, and I've written about it. This isn't a secret. Very manipulative. It wasn't just with me; it was with many, many people, where he just misused his power. But for me, it was a major jarring shock because I had never had that happen. I did not have an abusive childhood, and so to have somebody treat me in an abusive way was really quite the wake up. But first, I was in reaction. I had a miscarriage, and he accused me. He said, in front of other people, he told me that my ego had caused the miscarriage, and that was like 2 days after the miscarriage, and it was abusive. And so I went through different phases. First, I went through a feeling of my own deficiency. I didn't believe him, but a part of me, there was a hook. Something in me felt like I did something wrong, and then I went into, he's bad and he's wrong. And then I'd go back into feeling hurt, like how could that happen? And then into anger. And it was reinforced because others were also being abused by him, and there were lawsuits and so on. But for a couple of years, the feeling like the victim and then the judge, that kind of swinging, was very strong in me. And I had the belief that I should be able to forgive. I shouldn't be caught in this. It was like I had a timeline. It was okay to be angry and upset for a while, but then it was enough. So, but my body and my heart weren't cooperating. It was like anytime I'd think of him, I would feel this like surge of anger and want to get back in some way, want him ruined from the lawsuits and so on. And it became very clear. I remember one morning in particular that I, kind of was praying to forgive. And it became very clear when I felt that same clutching that I could not will it, and that it really was this body and emotions are an organic process. I couldn't will it, but I could feel in that sincerity of my intention, it let me deepen my attention. And so I really started paying attention to the place that felt like the victim. And not trying to get rid of it, but just noticing, okay, so this is the story, these are the feelings of this victim role. This is my act on earth right now. I'm playing in that role. And then I could feel the quality of the judge, just the way I asked you to, just how it felt in my body. And the more I just paid attention to that, to the feeling of the victim and the feeling of the judge, the more I found I was in this place of the compassionate witness. I was watching it, I was feeling it, but I was larger than those roles. And that was the beginning of the actual forgiveness, that I started resting more and more in the one who was watching and observing and compassionate towards the judge and the victim, and less in the roles themselves. And that's when I could start seeing him through different eyes. I could start seeing, his shadow. Underneath his arrogance, there was a kind of self-aversion, I think, that drove him. And, he had a lot of charisma, and he also had a real need to have power over. There was insecurity. But when I could see him that way, I could appreciate where he was brilliant, where he was creative, where he had vision, where he inspired, and also know I would keep my distance, and I would help other people keep a distance when appropriate. And yet I could, hold it all. And I share that with you because it was really important for me to let it be okay that I couldn't forgive on any timetable, but I could intend to forgive. It really opened the door. The question I often get is, are we supposed to forgive those that really create real heinous crimes, mass murders, and the like, those that cause huge massive suffering? And it's really the same thing, that those that cause suffering are suffering, and our reaction of hatred and anger only creates more suffering in us. Forgiving doesn't mean you let off the hook. Forgiving doesn't mean that you put down your boundaries. It just means you free your own heart. It's like that saying from there was a movie where one of the lines was, vengeance is a lazy form of grief. It's a lazy form of grief. It's also a lazy form of fear. It's the easiest thing to do, but we can't heal until we put down the resentments.